Yeah, when it comes to blockchain, when it comes to different type of projects, the legal framework is something that most founders don't know. So we have CK from WID. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thanks for having
So
me.
in terms of 2026, on all these projects that you're doing, how do you see the trends going, and how easy or how difficult it is to get the regulation and your project, completely compliant with the government policies and all?
Sure. I think fundamentally, regulators are expecting more. Typically, in the past, you used to be looking at just, put in a set of preventive control and then you try and detect something bad from happening. And then now increasingly, regulators around the world are actually expecting predictive, preemptive controls in place as well. What that means is that in the past, where people are buying fragmented solutions across the board, across the entire customer lifecycle, be it onboarding all the way to transaction monitoring and fraud detection with siloed solutions which don't talk to each other often, that creates a lot of gaps, right? So that's the trend. And that's what's been happening over the last, maybe 1 or even 2 decades. And what the regulators are expecting incumbents or even new companies or Fintech companies or Web3 companies to do is that they need to make sure that they are able to identify the risk even before they exist, right? So there's the predictive nature of the expectation. And therefore, technologies comes into the picture here, right? Artificial intelligence. So what we have built over the last several months is actually, to be able to ride on the fact that we have a lot of history with all the regulatory across this region, as well as the new technology that we're using to basically build an end-to-end platform all in one that basically covers digital onboarding all the way to transaction monitoring and fraud detection, using latest AI technology, including agentic AI, graph neural network, as well as machine learning, to create like a complete set of tools. I think that's fundamentally the trend that is happening today.
That is excellent. And as I was talking in my panel as well, that technology is something which runs on the background, right? On the front line, we have to, like for every economy, SMEs, small and medium businesses are the key to elevate the technology, or let's say get the mass adoption, right?
Absolutely.
So in terms of your technology, your solution, how would you define it for SMEs, for the sector which has mass adoption? And also countries like UAE, they have Virtual Assets Regulatory Authority, VARA.
Yep.
And then even developing countries, the place that I was born and raised, Pakistan, they also are working on some regulations, right? So how do you see the SMEs part? And then of course, collaborating with these firms to get access to.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head, in so far as what we do. We don't serve, or we don't actively seek out to serve the tier one, the big organizations, because I think they have enough wares with all to go and solve their own problems, right?
Yeah.
So we work with the, I would call it the mid-tier mass markets, because anyway, we're selling solutions to help people achieve better compliance outcomes. And that means that, especially for you term it SME, I'll call it the mid-tier market. And they typically don't have a lot of things. They don't have a lot of budgets, infrastructure, and they don't have a lot of talent, right? They don't have a lot of engineers, they don't have a lot of access to technology. And so the intention of why we exist at WIF, and the reason why we call ourselves WIF, is actually we want to be able to help people, comply with the width of compliance, right? Because that's actually what it is today, because the gamut of compliance obligation is actually continuously increasing, and it will increase further, right? So SME doesn't need to break their bank to actually afford a state-of-art solution, and because of people like us exist. Now, and then on the other aspects of whether or not, because there are different parts of the world that seems to have different regulations or somewhat slightly nuanced regulation, I say one thing: I can't solve world peace, but the thing that I do in respect of anti-money laundering compliance, typically, the requirements are pretty universal across the world, right? I'll give you one example, right? Financial Action Task Force is actually the supreme body, FATF in short, that sets anti-money laundering requirements for the rest of the world, right? Which is around 192 countries follows that, right? Be it in Middle East, in Asia, in ASEAN, in US, in Europe. Everywhere is the same. So, which means that, where we build our solutions, we're not just looking at one particular jurisdiction, and say, okay, we just built to that location. And that's not the way technology works. You got to be able to transient across, multiple jurisdictions. But a lot of, I would say, traditional vendors out there, they typically build their software with workflow that is hard-coded, right? And you know where I'm going with this. then traditional vendors will then say, okay, you can buy this. Now, if you want to change it, then I'll charge you change request. So there's a lot of people do not want to pay for that anymore. And then if you talk about the SME market, they don't have the money to pay for that. To democratize this process, to make the workflow builder something that our clients can actually do it themselves.
Adopt very quickly.
Adopt very quickly, and to be able to change the workflow however way they want, without coming back to us, and without needing a person involvement as well.
Amazing. That's incredible. So last question, then we'll close it up. When it comes to scaling, let's say I were to introduce you or you were to introduce yourself in different markets, right? Every government have different policy. Every region has different set of rules, right?
Yes.
So how your solution or your technology is adoptable globally on different countries? Tell us a little bit about
Yeah, in a way, address that a little bit just now, because we built it to international standard. That's fundamentally the backbone of how our products work. Because that, if you KYC CK in Singapore versus you KYC the same CK in Middle East or in Malaysia, fundamentally it's still me, right? But the level of review that you do, the scrutiny, is not necessarily dependent on whether which jurisdiction you're in. It's actually dependent very much, in my opinion, what is the product that you're offering to that person, right? Are you offering just a simple, for example, a low value remittance services? You're offering financial advisors, or you're offering, private bank services, right? I think the type of work is not dependent on which jurisdiction. It's actually dependent on what
activity
you are performing and you're offering to that customer.
Fantastic. Thank you for your time. It was a pleasure, and hope to see you soon again.
No problem.
Take care.
Thank you. Pleasure's mine.